Welcome to another special edition of the Fast Lane. I am joined by AJ Black from the BC Eagle Insider once again to preview Boston College and Virginia Tech, the cross division matchup in the ACC on the yearly basis. Back once again for a final time. And AJ, thank you so much for joining me once again, like you did last year.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad to be back on and here to talk some BC and Hokie football.
Yeah, and we'll hopefully talk some positives. Both teams came out with disappointing performances. Obviously, Hokies lose on the road against ODU, and then BC loses at home to Rutgers, which is a thing not often said in previous years, despite the sort of success Greg Schiano has had. But diving into that matchup, it was really a game where BC got dominated in the trenches.
Yeah, absolutely. BC was sloppy. There's no other way to put it. They got beat up front on that offensive line and they played all right for half, and then Rutgers dialed up that pressure and BC had no answer for it, and it caused miscues and miscommunication between a very young offensive line that has five new starters, and they just got to Djokovic and they could cue in on that run attack, and BC was basically held in check.
Speaking of that, this is, let's just dump it. Let's just dive into like really the key matchup of this game. And it's going to be that BC transition offensive line, as you mentioned, five new starters versus a Hokies defensive line that was actually a bright spot last week against Old Dominion.
Yep.
This is something where it's really the strength of the Hokies versus the weakness of BC. How important is that matchup, and how big is it that this offensive line show any sorts of improvement in week two?
It's critical, and it really will define this game. This is the matchup that will define the winner and loser here. BC can figure out, some of the mistakes they were making because the guys made some plays. There wasn't like they weren't executing the whole game, but they struggled down the stretch. If they can figure that out, then maybe that'll even things out a little bit more. But if they play like they did last week, I said this on my podcast, Locked on BC, earlier this week. Virginia Tech has a better defensive line than Rutgers, clearly. And that causes me much more concern about how this offense is going to work. Because if the offense falls apart, it's going to put more pressure on that BC defense. And as we saw against Rutgers, as it went down the stretch, they're asked to do too much. They can't hold it together. They fall apart as well. So it is so crucial that BC's offensive line take a big step forward. I can't even say a small step. They have to take a big step forward. And is that possible in 1 week? We'll have to wait and see.
Let's talk about the quarterback, Phil Djokovic. It feels like I can say this with any ACC quarterback. He's one of the best in the conference because this is a deep conference of quarterbacks. You call it the conference of quarterbacks. Obviously this game last season, BC did win, but this was his return off his injury, his hand injury, but he was never 100%. He probably was his worst game was the game against the Hokies last season. But what type of where is he at? He's talked about being 100%, and how big is that for this BC team to have a guy like Djokovic at 100%?
Yeah, I mean, Djokovic has to be at 100%. And it was frustrating to watch him last week because you could see how upset he got at times with the play of the offensive line. He was getting beat up bad. Like, he was getting hit a lot. And this is a guy that has said all summer long that he needs to keep himself healthy and play less recklessly. And it doesn't help when you have your offensive line getting killed, throughout the whole second half. So he was frustrated. And this team is going to go as far as he goes. A not healthy Phil Djokovic or going to Emmett Moorhead this year instead of next year, which is what the plan's supposed to be, is not going to get BC Bowl eligible. It's not going to get them to win many games. They need Djokovic this year. They need him to stay back there and run this offense. And I mean, we could get into it in a little bit if it's a question you have, but they got a new offensive coordinator, John McNulty, and we've done some film breakdown on Eagle Insider. His scheme is great, and it really does fit what Djokovic does well. It's the execution piece on a lot of different fronts, from Djokovic to Zay Flowers to the offensive line. It just wasn't there last weekend. Again, it's 1 week. It's one data point. Can they get past that? Was it a fluke? Something just, get off the rails? Or are we going to see that again against Virginia Tech and Blacksburg in a very loud Lane Stadium?
Well, you must have read my mind, AJ, as you mentioned, new offensive coordinator, Zay Flowers. There were rumors that he was getting flirted with, we'll just say, by some other teams. Jurkovec,
Yep.
kind of establishing himself as the guy, is back. How has this offense kind of changed? And what, they did produce some explosive plays. Zay Flowers had 2 touchdowns and 117 yards against Rutgers last week. Jurkovec threw for 283, 3 touchdowns, did throw 2 picks, but this offense has shown some explosion. It's kind of opposite of historic BC defense. It shows they can pass the ball well. It was the run game that struggled.
Yeah, I mean, they have what the big difference is McNulty brought with him is the way that they kind of set up the offense. So a lot of more motion. So they're trying to cause confusion on defenses, moving guys around all over the place, trying to get guys to move their heads, figure out what you get more reads on what the defense is doing. And then putting Jurkovec more in pistol and shotgun, which is not what Frank Cignetti, the old offensive coordinator, did last year. With the goal of getting him the ball out faster. Now, we didn't see a lot in terms of him getting the ball out faster just because the offensive line was just so putrid. But he can do that. And that, again, that system is tailor-made for Jurkovec to be successful, but it has to have all the other moving parts working with it too. And we didn't see that last week.
Moving to the other side of the ball, BC defensively did give up some yardage, only 22 points, which in the college game is pretty good considering how it was. They really kind of, did as much as they could to win the game for Boston College last week, outside that last touchdown to ultimately win the game for Rutgers. But
yep.
They're going to be an opportunistic against Grant Wells, who did throw, 4 interceptions, really 3 interceptions because one was on the, that last play where he's trying to get the ball deep. What kind of takeaways does this defense have? What does the coaching staff talk about, facing a quarterback in Wells that is not afraid to sling it, but it has been successful to the interception?
I mean, you're looking at a defense that did play. I mean, you're right. Like that last drive was the killer. They let up another touchdown on a 4-yard when Jurkovec fumbled it on the 4-yard line on a bad snap. And so, you take away that 7 points. They honestly only gave up 2 touchdowns that whole game. So they played well. The defensive line, again, though, needs to play better. And the linebackers are younger. There's a lot of younger guys out there. Bryce Steele's a former 4-star, and Cam Arnold, who you've seen play last year. They seemed hesitant last week. Like they didn't know what to do. And that was concerning. Again, going back to that execution, like they knew, the coaching staff probably told them what to do, but they weren't following through. And that's what led to that 96-yard drive, was that guys were not hitting the spots they were supposed to hit. They weren't going to the holes they were supposed to go. And it caused major issues. So why that happens, I don't know. The coaching staff is not forthcoming with what went on. But I think there's talent. The secondary is very good. Rutgers had no quarterback. They played 3 quarterbacks and their starter was out. So you didn't get to see them really get tested there. But against the run, they got bullied in that last drive. And there was some other times throughout the game, they just couldn't get off the field. So the front 7 to me is a big concern. I know Wells can run the ball. That could be a real area that Virginia Tech could exploit.
Keyshawn King, obviously currently entrenched as the number 1 running back, had 111 yards last week. You touched about the untested secondary, but kind of looking at this, big picture, both these teams had very disappointing week 1s. Obviously different tier of opponent. Both teams are kind of in a different situation. You have Jeff Hafley's obviously in his 3rd season trying to kind of finally get this team on track. This is, a team that looked promising last year and got derailed because of injury and was very hopeful after year 1. And then you have brand new coach Brent Pry, and he comes in and has a really disappointing kind of sloppy loss on the road to a group of 5 team at Old Dominion. So how important would it be for both teams just to get the victory in this one and just start, working towards the rest of this season?
Oh, it's critical for both teams. Absolutely. Like, both those first losses are tough for both programs and for different reasons. Obviously, as you said it well, right? Like BC fans and BC as a program was hoping with Jurkovec and Zay Flowers, you get a big season out of them, at least build some momentum. And then immediately it hits the brakes and you're like, what is going on? That's a concern. And then Virginia Tech just to lose to a G5 program and not a particularly like elite one, that's concerning as well. So, but you could take all those results and technically just throw them away. And coaches say that that's what they have to do. You have to like learn from it and move on. But it's the start of ACC play. These games mean more in terms of standings in the conference and bragging rights and all that good stuff in terms of bowl eligibility and all that stuff. ACC play is so crucial. So this game on Saturday night is must win for both programs. Both of these teams need this win in the worst way, and for variety of reasons. Because I mean, for BC, if they lose this game, all of a sudden bowl eligibility starts to look worrisome. For Virginia Tech, it's like, okay, what's going on with Brent Pry? You've got major storylines going back and forth, but one of these teams is going to leave on Saturday disappointed and really concerned about the future of their program.
AJ Black, the BC Eagle insider. And of course, you can catch this game live on CBS Sports Radio Lynchburg. Coverage starts at 6:30 as your home for the Hokies is CBS Sports Radio Lynchburg, as well as VT are in Southside 106.3 FM, as always, and the CBS Sports Radio Lynchburg app. A couple keys for this game that you hope that, BC can build on, or improve on last week. You touched on the offensive line a bit. Anything else that you see as kind of something where BC needs to improve on this in order to, exit the Lane Stadium and the home opener with a big W?
It's the mental errors. Last week, BC had 3 illegal man downfield calls. 2 of them wiped out big plays. And it was just Lyman just being sloppy. And it wasn't even, there was Lyman, I believe it was a wide receiver. Not wide receiver. No, it was Lyman just being sloppy throughout the game. So it's the offensive line, but just all around, like there needs to be a better execution of the game plan that they have in front of them, because on the defensive side, we've seen BC for a year now do pretty well against teams like Virginia Tech, right? That don't have like an elite offense. They can hang with those teams. But when the offense is sputtering and hurt themselves over and over again, it really limits what BC can do and then causes them to shoot themselves in the foot week after week. So for BC, they have to clean things up. They have to have a giant step forward and put that last game behind them and figure some stuff out and find it within themselves to really push themselves forward.
AJ, spread in this game is -2.5. So definitely appears to be a close one. It has been as high as 3 at some point. So a field goal game. Definitely expecting a close one in Lane Stadium on Saturday night. You got a pick for this one? What are your expectations for this game?
I'm thinking sloppy football is where I'm going with this one. I think it's going to be sloppy on both ends. When this schedule came out and I looked at what Virginia Tech was and kind of like putting their program together this year, I like Brent Pry as a coach. I think it's a great hire for them. I just think he has a couple years to put together his program. And I was like, okay, BC should be able to go to Virginia Tech and win this. And then they released the timing of the game. And I'm like, oh, it's a night game. That's like a 5-point swing. And so I at that point had Virginia Tech as the winner of that game. And then on top of that, again, we go back to the strengths versus weaknesses, right? Virginia Tech's strength is their defensive line. BC's weakness is their offensive line at night at Lane Stadium. I'm going to take Virginia Tech in the points in this game.
Well, AJ, thank you so much for joining me once again. We'll see what happens with all these ACC shakeups. Maybe next year, once again, we'll chat. We'll preview some great college football. But how can listeners, Hokies fans, connect with you and maybe learn more about BC as we head into the season?
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack_BC. I'm also the host of Locked On Boston College, a daily BC podcast talking all about Hokies in BC this week. And I'll be doing my 3 reasons why I think BC will win for Thursday's episode, along with my predictions on Friday. So you can check out of Eagle Insider Pod of 247 Sports in CBS. So check that out as well.
Well, AJ, thanks so much for joining me for this special edition of the Fast Lane. As always, you connect with us at Fastlane, Ed Lane, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Connect with me at Trey Lyle VT on Twitter. Thank you so much for listening to this special edition of the Fast Lane.